Hello, it's Aimee, and at long last, I will be creating the second part of my recipe book series. If you watched my first video, then you can see why I was contemplating on whether or not I should use a fine liner to outline my sketches. I'm not used to coloring things in without some line work to guide me, but I also felt like lining it with a harsh, bold line wouldn't give me the look I was going for. I somewhat met in the middle and tried to use a colored liner for my sketches. I also blurred out the recipe instructions to the cookies since it's not my recipe to share. I definitely will have to figure out a better way for me to film these spreads from now on, because trying to blur out that section every time it shows up on the screen was a pain. But it's still nice to see the bottom part filled out instead of the blank spaces by the doodles. If you're interested in the recipe itself, check out Rosanna Pansino's on it. I use her recipe to make the cookies my husband is obsessed with. Anyways, back to this spread. As I was lining my sketches, I was feeling a bit of regret with the sizing of my doodle. I wish it took up more of the page than it did, but there was no going back from it, of course. I let it go because I sketched these years ago, and it's also a good learning point for me for the next recipe layout I decide to create. Actually, there were quite a bit of learning points for me working on the spread. I thought it would look cool if I matched the lettering to the colors of the drawing, but in the end it was kind of hard to read. I still like the lettering font, but I know for next time to make sure the colors need to pop out more if I attempt something similar to this. I kept the ingredients and instruction area simple by just outlining a box for them. Moving on to the coloring, I used my go-to Tombow dual brush pens to fill in the drawings with a light base color. I was worried that the colors would smudge a lot since the LePen's fineliners were not waterproof like microns are. It probably just wasn't noticeable because they were similar in colors. I was very happy that I went with this route instead of using my usual darker outlines for everything. This recipe is a go-to for my family as well. It is by The Domestic Geek, and it has been an absolute lifesaver for me because it is one of the meals that my family always gets excited to eat, and it's not too labor intensive for me. While it does say spaghetti meatballs, the recipe is only tailored to the meatballs. One of these days, I'd love to make pasta and marinara sauce from scratch, but for now, I'll stick with store-bought boxed dry pasta and sauce. I will make sure to have the link in the description of her video if you're interested in the recipe yourself. I've made it a couple of times for my friends as well, and they also seem to enjoy it. I used a lighter brown color to fill in the ingredients and recipe sections and immediately regretted it. It went down darker than I thought it would, and you'll see why I wasn't happy with this decision later. I went back in with colored pencils to add more depth to the drawings. I could have went back in with markers, but similar to the cookies, I still wanted to strive for the softer look. Also, color pencils are more forgiving with mistakes compared to the markers. I was really happy with the coloring when I added more shading to the noodles. It may not look too realistic, but regardless, I loved it. I feel like I went a little too dark with the color choices in the sauce and meatballs. It was hard to add more details to the red because it blended in too well. I had to go darker than I'm comfortable with in some areas to allow the shading to show up. The noodles came in to save me from overanalyzing everything, luckily. Adding more shading to the meatballs meant making them darker, which in turn made them look a little more burnt than it should. I swear my meatballs don't turn out that way when I make them. I really didn't like how difficult it was to see the lettering, so I attempted to add some shading and a light gray border around the letters to help them stand out more. I probably should have gone darker with it because it wasn't popping out as much as I'd like. I just continued on though and added some highlights to the lettering and to the drawing. Remember when I said how much I regretted coloring in the brown sections? Well, this was why. I wanted to have a plaid pattern in that area to decorate the spread more, and unfortunately, putting a soft red color on top of that wouldn't give me the look I was going for. So instead, I decided to use those colors to make that pattern around the white spaces so I can achieve that plaid pattern look. I really wasn't sure how it would turn out and took a leap of faith. So far, I was cool with it. I was happy that my lines were at least straight enough and that it got rid of the empty spaces. When I drew in the lines from the opposite angle, the original coloring happened to be a happy accident. I wouldn't have thought of doing it this way in the first place if it wasn't for that. There were some areas of the pattern that I messed up in, but nothing a little whiteout couldn't fix. Overall, I ended up liking the spread more and was glad I took that leap of faith. To finish up the rest of this spread, I wrote in ingredients using some simple lettering. There are some things that I changed about the recipe to make it easier for myself, so what I'm writing down is not her exact recipe, but the majority of it. And that's about it. Another recipe layout that you can use for yourself. I know it's a bit similar to the cookie recipe layout, but I wanted to make a spread that required less doodling for each step and just have an area for the written instructions to keep it simple. The recipe instructions will be written off camera for me, so if you like the recipe, please make sure to check out the Domestic Geeks channel for it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing day and take care of yourself. Bye for now.